afternoon, then please type them into the box on either the top or the bottom column. And also, if people can use the hand icon, please indicate if you want to ask a question. There'll be plenty of time later for discussion. We've got 2 presentations and a panel that can answer some of the questions. We're really keen to capture the comments and questions today, because that's going to help us with our future work around this area. We've been talking for some time now, looking at the overlap between the definitions of disability hate crime and safeguarding adults at risk. And we thought this would be a really good opportunity by bringing together a wide group of professionals here to look at how we recognise that overlap. Also, what we're doing to make sure that we're recording things properly, responding effectively, and in particular, how we ensure that that support is coordinated for victims of hate crime and disabled people and those adults at risk we're supporting. Want to just begin, if we could introduce the panel that we've got today. So I'm just thinking, Reshma, would you start?
Hi, I'm Reshma Hirani. I'm the Hate Crime Reporting Coordinator at Barnet Mencap.
And Fiona?
Hi. Sorry, Ray, I wasn't expecting you to ask me, but I'm Fiona Bateman. I'm the independent chair of the Adult Safeguarding Board. Hi, everyone.
And has Sian joined us yet? No. Graham, would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, afternoon, everybody. Got the system working in the end. So I'm Graham Ambler. I work for the Barnet Group. So I'm here representing Your Choice Barnet today. So we support a wide range of adults, older adults, adults with disabilities. So thanks for inviting me along today.
Great. And Elaine?
Hello there, I'm Elaine Jackson, and I'm the Faith Officer for the Metropolitan Police, covering Barnet, Brent and Harrow.
That's great. Thanks, Elaine. And have we got Monica yet?
Yes, she is on.
Oh, great. Monica, are you happy to introduce yourself?
She's definitely on, Monica.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry, hi. Hi, can you hear me? Hello?
Okay, so...
Hello? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can, yes, we can, Monica, yeah. So are you happy to introduce yourself?
Yes. So I'm Monica Przyzycka. I'm the head of assessment and prevention team and safeguarding lead for adults in Barnet.
Yeah. And Monica, you happy to do the first presentation about the work of safeguarding and the MASH team?
Yes, definitely. I'm quite happy to do some introduction in terms of the MASH team and in terms of the safeguard and the act.
That's great. If I hand over to you then, Monica.
Lovely. So if I can perhaps explain a little bit around the safeguarding and what it means in terms of the requirements of the local authority, and then I'll talk you through around how we work with adults and what we need to be mindful of when we do work with adults. And also then I will talk you through around specifics with regards to the MASH team. So the Section 42, so under the Care Act, Section 42 applies where a local authority has reasonable cause to suspect that an adult in its area, and the adult does not have to be an ordinary resident of the area, has needs for care and support, whether these needs are being met by the local authority or not, is experiencing or is at risk of abuse or neglect, and as a result of those needs is unable to protect him or herself against the abuse or neglect or the risk of it. And in that situation, the local authority must make or cause to be made whatever inquiries it thinks it's necessary to enable to decide whether any action should be taken in the adult's case. And if so, what and by whom. So when we talk about doing the initial screening, we work in alongside with individuals and partner agencies in gathering all that information in connection with Section 42 inquiries that will then support us to make the decision whether we need to progress to inquiry under Section 42 or whether we need to do it as an under non-statutory inquiry. When we're talking about what safeguarding means, it means protecting an adult's right to live in a safely free from abuse and neglect. And it's about us coming together, organizations working together to prevent and stop both the risks and experience of abuse and neglect. And while at the same time, we're making sure that the adult's well-being is promoted. And in doing so, we need to make sure that we have regard to the adult's views, wishes and feelings, and also their beliefs in deciding on any actions. So we always aim to promote the adult's well-being, and we always try to ensure that we adhere to the 6 principles of the safeguarding, which is empowerment, and we need to make sure that people being supported and encouraged to make their own decisions. And we also have to make sure that obviously we do adhere and we follow the Mental Capacity Act, and we also make sure that in our work with adults we do not we've got regards to the Human Rights Act as well. Another principle of our work under the safeguarding is prevention. So it's always better to take action before harm occurs. So where possible, we work with adults and with organizations on aiming to prevent any abuse happening. We also work on the basis of proportionality. So we need to ensure that our response is less intrusive and is appropriate to the presented risk. We also work in making sure that we support those who are in the greatest need, and if that means that we need to have a safeguarding plan, then that's what we need to be arranging with the adults to ensure that the risk of abuse or neglect is removed or prevented where possible. We're also making sure that we work in partnership with all our colleagues, not only across the local authority, but mainly with communities and mainly with voluntary care sectors. And it's so important that that partnership is based on open and honest conversations, and we're very transparent with actions that we and actions and work that we do with the adults, so that everyone can be informed of each other's program and plans. We also, when we're working with adults, we also need to make sure that we are accountable and transparent. So everyone understands, and mainly the adult understands the role of everyone in the process. And when we talk about making safeguarding personal, it means that we focus on the outcomes the adult wants to achieve, and it's very much person-led process. We engage with the person in conversation about how best to respond to the safeguarding situation, that in a way that enhances their involvement, their choices and control, as well as improving the quality of life and well-being and their safety. We need to make sure that when we're working together, we have got regard to people's wishes and feelings, and that we fully understand and respect their decisions. But as I mentioned as well, in doing so, we also need to make sure that those who need support are being supported by communities, by independent mental capacity advocates, as well as next of kin, as well as lasting power of attorneys, and so forth and so on. In Barnet, we have introduced a adult safeguarding MASH team, and the team has started on the 14th of November last year. The team consists of 1 team manager, 2 lead practitioners, and 7 social work practitioners. The role of the adult safeguarding MASH team is to screen all the incoming referrals, ensuring that the threshold that what I was mentioning at the beginning is applied, and at the same time, if applicable, we making decision with the adult and with other professionals that we will be progressing further with this to the inquiry, that there is an interim safeguarding plan in place, which at a later stage is then reviewed. And the review of the safeguarding plan includes the adult, the representatives, and also the voluntary care sector and any other community resource that is available and is involved in the adult's life. The Safeguarding Adults MASH team is also where we started now taking on inquiries. So what we had when I was talking to you, when I mentioned about making safeguarding personal, what we have decided
Have we lost Monica?
I think we seem to have lost her sound.
We do, I think.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
We've got you back, Monica.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
We can now.
I don't
We
know
did lose you, but we've got you back.
Okay. Can you tell me at what point I lost my connection?
Well, that's a good test of how closely I was listening, wasn't it? You were talking about how the team had been set up last year and the numbers in it, and then the responsibilities around the thresholds and applying the threshold.
Yes. So the team's responsibility is to apply, to screen, to apply the threshold, and then in discussions with the adult and with professionals involved, if we're progressing to inquiries, we will either carry out those inquiries within the MASH team, or we will pass some of the inquiries on to most appropriate teams. So in practice, what we have noticed is the engagement from the adult is more visible, where we've got continuity and consistency of practitioners. So we have decided that some of the inquiries, including and mainly those that involve domestic violence, do remain with the MASH team, so that the adult who started having those initial conversations with the practitioner who started screening the referral, has got that continuity of knowing that this is the person who's helping me for the next for the next future, for the next couple of months or so. We have, and that in return gives us the ability to continue with those in-depth conversations and with further screenings, and also to review the risk management plan that is being implemented, is being drawn at the very, very early stage. In our inquiries as well, when we often receive safeguarding referrals with regards to domestic violence for people who have got care and support needs, and when the person who's causing harm is a family member, often living with the person, or providing some level of care, element of care as well, and they are known to, for example, mental health or other professionals like Solace, we do often liaise with those partner agencies in informing the risk assessment and risk management planning, because it's inclusive of both the adult at risk and also the person who's causing harm or who's likely to cause harm. So in that, we are getting more robust and better engagement from the adults, themselves. Just so you know, we have seen since the lockdown, we have seen an increase in domestic violence referrals. We've seen referrals where family members are struggling with their caring roles. We've seen referrals where family members have been caring for people, not necessarily knowing exactly how to care in relation to, or what actions they need to take in terms of pressure care or skin conditions, in terms of transfers, and those kind of like them not lacking awareness of, in terms of what it means, what they need to do in their caring role and how they should be caring for their loved ones, has resulted in some of the inquiries, some of the safeguarding alerts being raised to the MASH team, where we very quickly realize that in actual fact there needs to be a greater training given to the carers, and also better understanding of the person's role in caring for the adult at risk. So we do, in terms of the adult SMASH team, we do the majority of the time we do the screening and obviously applying the threshold, but and a lot of the cases we are also taking through inquiries, so that the adult has got one practitioner assigned to them, and then their work and their report can continue for as long as the inquiry is continuing as well. And I'm sure that you will have seen, sometimes we do contact partner organizations for support in terms, for example, we work with Solace, who on a number of occasions have carried out a risk assessment with the adult at risk, and we have delegated that task to Solace because of their involvement already with the adults case, and also the adult's preference to have that continuity with Solace. So we do, although we have got statutory duties, we also ensure that where appropriate, we can share that responsibility of making sure that all other partner agencies are involved in safeguarding the adults. So I think that's in a nutshell. Please do ask me any questions if you have.
Okay, Monica, thanks for that. That's a really clear overview of the safeguarding responsibilities and how we've managed the overlap, I think, with things like domestic abuse. We've done a lot of work in Barnet in the last 2-3 years developing the hate crime work and hate crime strategy. And if we can move on to the second presentation from Reshma, if I can hand over to you. Just on mute.
Oh, sorry. We do have one question. I think Afi had put their hand up to speak, to ask a question. I wasn't sure. Did we want to take questions as we go along?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we can. We will have time for questions and discussions, but we could take a quick question at this point.
Hi, Monica. Hi, Monica. This is a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
I just maybe MASH Children's Service. Basically, all the call to family services come through MASH, and then in MASH they will decide which team it should be allocated to and whether they meet the threshold or not. But the process is not the same with adult MASH, is it?
So I say this in theory, it's the same in if the adult if there who's being referred to adults team is not either known to adults team, or at the time of referral being sent does not have allocated worker. So that will then come to the adult SMASH team, who will screen, who will do the initial info gathering, and then will ensure that appropriate actions are taken as and when are necessary. If, for example, the adult who is being referred has got mental health conditions, then that referral goes to the mental health team. We have an agreement that we don't, at the moment, we do not screen those adults, but this is likely to be changing, so that we will be expanding on the roles and responsibility or remit of the adult SMASH team. Similarly, we have with colleagues with adults with suffering from learning disabilities. These go straight to learning disabilities duty team at this moment in time. But there is a plan that the adult SMASH team will expand on its expertise to actually enable that, that screening within the adult SMASH team.
Oh, thank you. But so it is different to, I mean, the MASH team adults work alongside the duty team, but they have two different functions. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. So
Okay.
in Barnet, we have got, so the adult SMASH team is responsible for screening all the safeguarding concerns that
Oh, only safeguarding,
that
yeah.
come
Okay.
in. Yes, safeguarding concerns. Whereas
Ah,
any request for character assessments, reassessments, review of care and support planning, those referrals go to the urgent response team via our frontline, which is Social Care Direct.
excellent. I don't know, Ray, if I can ask another question or not.
Could we, sorry, Effie, could we,
Okay.
we better get it. There'll be plenty of time later, I hope, for
That's
questions
okay.
and for comments. So
Thank you.
if we could then move on to Reshma. I know you've got a presentation too.
Yes.
Thanks.
So I'm just going to share my screen. Ray, can you see that?
I can, yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to start with a brief explanation about the hate crime project and the definitions of hate crime. So what is hate crime? The legal definition comes under the Crime and Disorder Act and also the Criminal Justice Act, and the Police and the Crown Prosecution Service have agreed the following definition for identifying and flagging hate crimes. I'll read through the definition and then we can have a bit of a closer look at it after that. Any criminal offence which is perceived by the victim or any other person to be motivated by hostility or prejudice based on a person's race or perceived race, religion or perceived religion, sexual orientation or perceived sexual orientation, disability or perceived disability, and any crime motivated by hostility or prejudice against a person who is transgender or perceived to be transgender. So we'll have a closer look at that rather wordy definition. The law distinguishes between hate crimes, hate incidents, and then discrimination. So hate crimes are incidents that are perceived to be motivated by hostility or prejudice and which actually breach criminal legislation. Hate incidents are incidents that are perceived to be motivated by hostility or prejudice, but do not, in isolation, breach criminal legislation. And then we have discrimination, and that's the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people, commonly on the grounds of race, age, or sex. So we may see those kind of discrimination cases come up in tribunals, for example, employment tribunals, but they don't fall under the they don't breach criminal legislation and so are not defined as hate crimes. Reports that are made to the police would be recorded as crimes or non-crime hate incidents. So a hate crime is any incident which the victim or anyone else thinks is because of someone's hostility or prejudice towards them. This could be because of disability, faith, religion and belief, race, ethnicity and nationality, sexual orientation, and gender identity. So those are the 5 strands of identity which criminal legislation recognizes as falling under the definition of hate crime. So we've looked at the reason behind the crime, so the hostility and prejudice that falls behind the actual breach of criminal legislation. So now let's look at some of the types of crime that are commonly motivated by hate. So the things that we often hear about in the media, or other high-profile cases: verbal abuse, like name calling or offensive language; physical abuse, like hitting, punching, kicking, or spitting; damage to your property, for example, graffiti or throwing rubbish; malicious complaints, for example, over parking, noise, or smells; displaying or circulating discriminatory posters or leaflets; and online hate crime. So that's posting discriminatory information, for example, through social media platforms. So these are some of the very common types that we see. This year, due to the pandemic, we had a lot of our agencies and our network reporting a reduction in face-to-face assault, but an increase in online hate crime. So Community Security Trust, who we work very closely with, they recorded 34 online anti-Semitic incidents in March and 48 in April. They also reported an increase in hijacking of Zoom calls and other video conferences, for example, live stream synagogue services. And although this increased this year, possibly because of the lockdown and the pandemic, we also know that last year they recorded a high total of 1,805 anti-Semitic incidents in the UK. So online hate crime is really something that we've seen increase in the past few years rapidly. Gallup, the anti-LGBT hate crime agency, who we work closely with, have also reported an increase in online hate crime, for example, hijacking of drag queen performances. And they also said that there's been a lot of targeting of LGBT plus support organizations, unfortunately. So I think with lockdown necessitating the increased online communications, we are concerned that these figures may continue to rise nationally in the next year or so. The other type of hate crime that we have seen increase in this year, possibly due to the pandemic, is interpersonal hate crime. So this is where the victim knows the perpetrator, and this was particularly prevalent in what we call neighbor disputes. So CST again reported that out of the 86 anti-Semitic incidents reported to them in April, 10 of those were classed as interpersonal, where the victim and offender had a relationship to each other. 9 of those involved neighbours or housemates, and the other one was landlord and tenant. And they had quite a good quote in their recent report. They said, with people having to spend more time at home and frustrations building at life in lockdown, pre-existing localised tensions are potentially heightened. With fewer external outlets, these can spill into hate speech directed at those close by. So at Barnet Mencap, we also found this to be the case during the pandemic and lockdown period. Out of the 5 incidents that we recorded between April and August, 3 of those related to disability hate crime between neighbours, and the other 2 were online incidents. And the third area of hate crime that we did sadly see at the start of this year was the emergence nationally of hate crime towards people that appear of Southeast Asian or Chinese origin following the outbreak of COVID-19. At the start of the year, from January to March, police recorded 267 incidents, including racially aggravated harassment, assaults, harassment, malicious communications, and also criminal damage. And this was 3 times higher than the same period in the previous 2 years. So we know that there was an increase due to the situation this year. Going on into the year, incidents moved to increased reports of hate crime against other ethnic minority groups following the reports of COVID-19 affecting the BAME communities. And I just mentioned this because I think it shows that hate crime is something that changes quite frequently. We can't always anticipate where people are going to have hate, motivated by prejudice or hate towards those 5 strands. So it just shows how hate crime does change quite rapidly. So this slide was from the British Crime Survey, and it questions why the impact is so much greater for hate crime than for other crimes. And I think the answer is that it's very personal to the victim. all of these feelings and emotions would apply to everyone on the first day that a crime is committed. But with hate crime, it was assessed that there is a longer impact. And if you take, for example, depression, where 25% of hate crime victims suffered from depression following the crime as compared to other crimes. And I think the other one that really stands out is anxiety. And I think we know with a lot of our clients, certainly at Barnet Mencap, depression and anxiety do affect people, particularly if they've been the victim of a very aggressive crime motivated by hate. This was also from the British Crime Survey, and I think they did a lot of research, and also when we are doing our awareness raising work, and usually we will be out during Hate Crime Awareness Week having information stands and speaking to our residents to find out whether they would report and how they would go about reporting hate crime, and also, you know, giving them more information on how they can. Many people do have this feeling that, you know, action may not be taken, and, you know, some have a fear of reprisal, some have a fear of the police. So we do know that these are feelings that do exist amongst our residents, and it's something that our project is really working towards trying to stop. Go a little bit more detail into disability hate crime now. Again, the Crime and Disorder Act and the Criminal Justice Act define disability hate crime as any criminal offence which is perceived by the victim or any other person to be motivated by hostility or prejudice based on a person's disability or perceived disability. And the Equality Act defines a disabled person as someone who has a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term effect on their ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities. So disability hate crime would include anyone who is targeted as a result of his or her disability or impairment, including visible disabilities and hidden disabilities, physical disabilities, learning disabilities, and autism spectrum conditions. And it also includes those with mental health conditions and emotional distress or anxiety. The Equality Act also goes on to include special rules that ensure people with HIV, cancer, and multiple sclerosis are deemed to be disabled from the point of diagnosis. So we know that there is quite a wide definition of disability under the hate crime legislation, and I think that's quite important for all of our staff to be aware of. Why report it as a disability hate crime? So that enhanced sentencing is more likely to happen. If a crime is recorded as a disability hate crime from the very outset, there will be enhanced sentencing if it reaches the stage of prosecution. And it shows how just the use of one adjective can add an extra 18 months onto a sentence. So, for example, verbal abuse is always a crime. If it is hate-related verbal abuse, that one adjective can increase the sentence by 18 months. Some examples of disability hate crimes: grooming, carer abuse, assault, harassment via social media, targeting homes, goading, and targeting family. We at Barnet Mencap, we use the term mate crime, so a term used by organisations where those with learning disabilities or mental health conditions are befriended and the perpetrator is therefore known to them. An example of this that has raised concern is financial abuse. So, for example, where the perpetrator befriends the victim and persuades them to give them money or their credit or debit card. So that would be mate crime. And also cuckooing, where the perpetrator befriends the victim and uses their home for criminal activity, for drugs or storing stolen goods. So what do we know about disability hate crime? We know that reporting figures are low. Whilst 9 out of 10 people with a disability and or a mental health condition have witnessed and experienced hate crime, the reporting figures remain significantly low. We know that it can seriously impact the lives of disabled people who are already perhaps marginalised by society. Social isolation can be a huge issue for disabled people, and a fear of disability hate crime can make people more reluctant to get out and about in society. We also know that faith, race and religious hate crime are often reported by specialist national organisations such as Community Security Trust and Tell Mama. So it makes data collection and analysis, and also the sort of media focus more concentrated on faith, race and religious hate crime as compared to disability hate crimes. So this shows the figures for Barnet as recorded by the Metropolitan Police. This year so far we've had, until August, we've had 533 incidents of racist and religious hate crime recorded by the police in Barnet. Out of those, 84 were anti-Semitic and 14 anti-Muslim. So we have the highest population of Jewish people in this borough in London. So the anti-Semitic hate crime figures do correlate to that. Comparatively, disability hate crime, there were only 9 incidents recorded by the police this year so far. Homophobic cases were 46, and there were 2 transgender cases. Transgender hate crime is also an area that we know has very low reporting figures. So just some more on the figures there. Over 7,300 disability hate crimes were reported nationally to the police, so in England and Wales last year and this year, to 2019 to 2020. So the reports of disability hate crime were up 12% across England and Wales, but only 1.6% of those cases resulted in perpetrators being charged. So although the reporting was up from 2019 to 2020, the prosecution, unfortunately, the charging and prosecution is not. What we do know is nearly half of the reports of the police had an element of violence, including assault and harassment. So this rose by 16%. And 1 in 10 of all of the reported disability hate crimes took place online, increasing by 46% last year. So there's definitely a national increase in online hate crime. And that includes cyber abuse on social media platforms and also gaming forums. Disability hate crime is something that is prevalent also on gaming forums, the research has found. So some of the key challenges to reporting hate crime and disability hate crime. There's a lack of understanding and also a fear of asking questions from authorities, including police, schools and health and social care professionals. There's a fear of reprisal, particularly in interpersonal hate crime, where we talked about the victim knowing the perpetrator, possibly it's a neighbour or somebody that lives nearby. There's a fear that the police that the victim won't be believed by the police, or that the police may not take any action. There's also a perception that the victim may be placed on trial and assumptions may be made about their credibility, so that people won't believe necessarily that the perpetrator would have committed that crime. It's also difficult to prove, so only 1% do get a sentence uplift. Often there just isn't enough evidence to prove that verbal abuse did have an element of disability hate crime in the incident. And unfortunately, at the moment, there aren't any effective training or treatment programs for offenders. Some of the other key challenges: there's a lack of funding for advocacy services. So there's insufficient access to support across the entire reporting, investigative and judicial process. And that's probably the only way to make victims feel safe and confident in reporting to the police, is to be able to support them through the entire process. And that's from the start, when it's reported to the police, all the way through to the judicial process. We know that online hate crime is increasing, and so provisions need to be made to make the internet a less threatening place for disabled people. There needs to be more effective monitoring and recording of hateful activity, and online platforms would ideally start to take this behaviour more seriously. And then lastly, the key challenge that we're going to go on to discuss now is whether something is whether a crime is the result of vulnerability of the victim or hate by the offender, or can it be both? And so we're going to look more at the overlap between safeguarding and hate crime. So I will hand you back over to Ray now.
Thanks, Reshma. That's very interesting, and sure that's given people a lot to think about. So it's moving on to the discussion now. I think we know that the definitions and the terminology around hate crime and safeguarding are different, but I think people will see from the two presentations we've heard that there's certainly potential overlap in a number of them when we talk about categories of abuse, which could be physical or financial abuse, psychological or discriminatory. And we know from some of the examples Reshma gave us of the crimes and incidents that there could be an overlap. And I suppose we've been discussing this for the last few months with the sense that at the moment, the feeling is we're not always capturing both of them. So it could be that where we're picking up reports of hate crime, that's not also being seen as potential safeguarding and not always using that safeguarding route. But at the same time, the work that many people can be involved in around safeguarding may not always be considering the potential aspects around hate crime and an incident. Certainly that it doesn't seem that it's being recorded in that way. And I think unless we're doing that, there is a risk that we're not coordinating our work as effectively as we could be. So it really is time now to throw open for any comments or questions. We have got our panel here, so we've got people with some expertise who can step in, or it's just a chance to get a more general discussion going. So chance for questions. We've got Peter.
Hi Ray. Hello.
Hi.
Hello the panel. Really interesting presentations. Thank you. Just one initial question from me. Just picking up on the stats you shared, Reshma, about the hate crime levels this year, and looking at the previous couple of years as well. It seemed overall for most of the categories we've probably seen a bit of a reduction in the levels of reported hate crime this year. Is there any sort of sense or feeling or feedback what's behind that? Is that, you know, linked to the less people being out and about because of the lockdown situation, or greater difficulties with people reporting or making contact with services? Just wondering if there's any sort of feedback behind those stats.
We know that crime has fallen generally across London. So, for example, we work closely with the Safer Transport Police, and they certainly saw a big reduction in, for example, hate crime on public transport because of people being out less. Buses are less crowded even now post lockdown, as are the trains, and so that has naturally led to that reduction of face-to-face, person-to-person hate crime. But however, I think that's what's also led to this huge spike in the online hate crime. And I think that that's one of the areas that we definitely need to look at, is how to be able to report the hate crime that's taking place online. I think that a lot of suggestions have been made where perhaps the online providers, platforms, have to take a bit more responsibility for taking down this hate crime, and also perhaps the tools for people to be able to report that more effectively. I think the word was out, if there is an aggressive hate crime that takes place on the streets, people will call the police. If there is some hate-related graffiti out on the streets, people will call the police. They'll use 101, they'll email online, they may let the council know. But I think that with the online hate crime increasing, perhaps there needs to be more information about how people should, the tools that people can use to report that and have it taken down as well.
Thank you, Reshma. It's really interesting.
Any other comments? Thinking with the panel, so we've got Graham.
Yeah, well, I'll just yeah, it's a very interesting presentations from both people there. Thank you very much. I suppose the first thing I was thinking was our first priority should be just to support the victim. We sort of worry about what category it's, you know, going to fit into, sort of as the second thing. But I do get the importance. So I suppose my question was going to be what different outcomes are we seeking if we decide it's one or the other? How is it going to feel to the victim? What's the difference going to be? In other words, what outcome are we seeking by this discussion, if you see what I mean? From my point of view, we have a lot of the sort of reports we send to Reshma are about financial abuse quite often. So someone with a disability who's been taken advantage of. So different to, I don't know, a partially sighted person on the bus with a guide dog gets attacked by a group of youths chanting about disability. Quite clearly, it's a crime, and he's been targeted because of his disability. Take another example: someone with dementia. I decide I'll take the £20 note out of their wallet because I know that they won't remember that they ever had a £20 note in their wallet, so I can get away with it. So there I am, just taking advantage of someone because of their disability, but I don't particularly hate them. I'm just doing it because it's an easier crime to get away with. And I suppose to a certain extent, maybe that, do those two kind of demonstrate what you're trying to, what question you're trying to ask?
Reshma?
I'm on mute. Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, definitely. I think that we're looking at whether the person is in that vulnerable situation. So anybody can be put into a vulnerable situation, but disabled people are sometimes seen as inherently vulnerable. And so this itself alters the way in which they are perceived and treated. And I think that's where the problem is that they are already seen as a vulnerable target. And you're absolutely right. Where's the hate in that? And I think it's more in the way in which they are perceived. And it, you know, we know that there's been serious crimes that have taken place involving violent assault and even murder. And you know, it shows that a disabled person was targeted because of hostility towards them or their impairment. And, you know, are they being referred in that situation? I think the perpetrator will be identified as committing a crime. But again, in the situation that Graham describes, where are we taking the action? Yes, we're going to protect the victim, but what is happening with the perpetrator? We should be looking at both of those angles, and I think that's where the overlap comes in.
Yeah, I think hate can sometimes sound like a high threshold about what we mean by hate, but I think it's also worth remembering that it is about perception, and the law allows for the perception, whether that's from the victim or from another person. So it can be quite subjective. So somebody who feels that the crime against them or the incident involving them has been motivated by hate, then the victim can say that it's an empowering tool in that respect. I'm looking, we've got Fiona.
Yeah, hi. I wanted to come in on this as well, because I think because we use terms like hate and make crime, we kind of think of that emotion has to be attached to it. What really this kind of does is give a kind of a concrete example, if you like, of our positive obligations within the public sector to promote well-being based on and to promote equality of opportunities. So the Equality Act has, 9 protected characteristics, which I won't name because I'll forget one and offend, and I don't mean to. But disability is right up there, as is race and sex. And of course, if someone views someone as an easier target or manipulates a situation, identifies somebody as like, because of their disability, and victimizes them about that, then we obviously have a positive obligation to respond just as ferociously. I know that a huge amount of work has been done by the teams and by Race and all the people involved in setting up reporting centres, so that we can make it really clear, very explicit to people with disabilities who are abused also from because of their race or their gender or the gender assignment or whatever, any of those protected characteristics, that we make it easier. And we facilitate their ability to say, this is not fair and this should not be happening to me. One of the things I think we're all very keen to see as well, though, that change in behaviour and practice is targeted at the people who actually undertake that activity, and that people understand that that it won't be tolerated, and that actually we will look at the maximum prosecution where this does occur. And I think that's got to be something that really champion going forward, because the data does show that we're getting much better at getting the message out to people that they shouldn't have to live with this level of abuse. They shouldn't have to tolerate any kind of victimisation because of a protected characteristic. But equally, we need people in the community to understand that where they behave in that manner, they will be prosecuted with the utmost power of the law. And I think that's a really critical message to get out to people as well. Sorry to sound like I'm on a soapbox, but I think it's a really crucial thing that we challenge and change perpetrators' behaviours as much as we encourage and support those who've been victims to come forward and tell us.
I think one other argument for trying to go down both routes as well in terms of outcome, we know that prosecution and convictions is sometimes an outcome that people who have been abused are looking for, although we know how difficult that can be to achieve that sometimes. And as Reshma was pointing out in the presentation, if something has been reported as a hate crime, seen as a hate crime, then that can lead to an enhancement in the sentence. I'm just wondering, Elaine, did you want to come in here and perhaps give some point from the police's point of view?
No, I was just listening to Fiona, and I really agree that with what she's saying, it would be so good. It's getting to the grassroots of the matter with the perpetrators, and I think sometimes the realization of what they're doing, it's as simple as that, but perhaps they don't. It's true, it's quite close to my heart, this. It's not just as a police perspective, but my son has learning difficulties, so it's it's something that I've come across myself in years gone by with him. And an unfortunate thing is, a lot of the time the victims themselves, if you call them victims, aren't aware that they're actually, a crime is being committed against them. It could be, some people think, for example, if it's their own carer could be the perpetrator, but because they're the carer, a lot of people don't actually realise that it's an offence. The victims themselves might not realise that just simple, being mimicked and what have you, it's all criminal offences, and they're very unlikely to report it to police, as we've said before. Reshma has pointed out before, it's usually a third party. But that's if they realise what's happening. And unfortunately, I think the biggest thing with going forward with the police have, saying about the figures, the numbers of prosecutions, is sometimes it's literally the lack of evidence, and you know that it's not enough to go, to take it to court. There's just not enough evidence unless it's, you have witnesses, you have, willing to go to court, you have statements, you have CCTV, you have, yes, you have all of it. Sometimes it's it's simply down to the lack of evidence, which is shame.
Thanks, Elaine. I'm thinking with, I know we've got a number of social workers who are involved today, and I'm just thinking with the safeguarding work that you might be involved with, how routinely or not is there any consideration that this could have been a hate crime or hate crime incident, and would people know and follow through how to report that as a hate crime?
As far as we would pick up straight away that it would be hate crime, the safeguarding unit, community safety unit, would deal with this immediately. And also, as stated before, I think Ramesh pointed out in the slides, it really is concentrated on, it's more of a specialist kind of training. This is included in just in the normal community safety training. It's the norm now, because it's looked upon with as a very important thing, and as I said, simply because the sentencing will be a lot more severe. Yeah. So it is recognised as hate crime from the outset.
That's good. I know it's changed a lot, and certainly would be in the police. I'm kind of wondering whether it would be amongst social workers. You could tell me I'm wrong, I'm hoping.
I was till a year ago, I worked in the domestic violence, which I don't work there now, but yes, we'd have a few battles.
How I mean, is it a discussion that comes up in the MASH team when you're looking at referrals, Monica?
Yes, so during the screening and information gathering, we always look at what could potentially be not only a financial abuse, financial harm or domestic harm, but also could potentially be a hate crime. So these two could very, very much go in parallel. In terms of safeguarding, so obviously we're looking at people who have got needs for care and support, and because of those needs for care and support, that they are unable to protect themselves, and in those circumstances we have a duty to not only take further inquiries, but also to support the adult to develop that safeguarding plan, which often, apart from referring to the police, will also include various other things. For example, moving to a different place, having, for example, panic buttons, having, for example, carer coming in, having somebody assisting you to go to the bank to withdraw their cash. So, having personal assistant to kind of, provide that additional level of support and safety net. So there will be a variety of options discussed with the adult. And also in the process, we will ensure as to what is the person's understanding of it, and what is that, and how they wish to be supported. And we need to be kind of, very clear that sometimes people will have, will not necessarily know or be able to understand the level of abuse they are at, and therefore, we will then need to make sure that we consider other legislation like Mental Capacity Act, and just make sure that we safeguard adults.
That's great.
And
Thanks.
I have to say is since the lockdown, we've got so the Marek attends every Wednesday. We have got other safeguarding leads meeting with us on a Monday to discuss a number of referrals that are perhaps not necessarily with regards to a hate crime or domestic violence, but we are organizing and forming more closer relationships and partnerships with other professionals that enables us to actually exchange those conversations very frequently, and then forms those partnerships better. And maybe there is something that we might want to consider actually cross-checking the referrals that come into your service, just to see whether or not these shouldn't be reported to the safeguarding team.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Monica. Any other questions or comments that people? Afi? Hi, do you want to make your comments, Afi? Afi, did you want to ask a question or have any comments?
Might be the connection.
I was just going to say we'll come back. I know Afi had a second question because she had one earlier. So I'm thinking too, though, Reshma, one of the things obviously you offer in the post is training and awareness raising, both for staff and for people who've got lived experience of safeguarding as well, haven't you?
Yes, so we can do the staff training. In today's presentation, I went through the definition and kind of the background and explaining what hate crime is, but we haven't talked about the reporting and the options for that, and that's something that I'd like to cover if we were going to do a workshop with staff. And we do a lot of awareness raising with service users, and really talking to them about lending someone their credit card and debit card, giving somebody some cash. And I think it's so difficult because when the police are called in, when they ask a, let's say, victim, did you give the person the £10 or did you give them the debit card? The answer is yes, they did. And I think that does make it so much harder for the police to continue that investigation, whilst we know that that person is being targeted because of who they are. They're being targeted because they're vulnerable, they're an easy target, and that's how they're seen. And whilst we know that, it's so difficult because their answer to that question is yes, I did give them the money, or yes, I let them come and visit my flat and stay here and store things here, let's say. So it makes it so much harder. So a lot of our awareness raising work with our service users who have autism and learning disabilities really goes to doing role plays with them and explaining how they can not put themselves in these situations. It is sad that they are seen inherently as vulnerable targets or an easy target, but we can help them to protect themselves from perpetrators, and we can only do that through the awareness raising work that the project does.
That's great, thanks. Peter?
Just done reading. Thanks, Ray. Yeah, no, it was just a quick one, just to say I really like Monica's idea around maybe having a look at what we do in terms of cross-referencing against those hate crime referrals that are coming in, and seeing perhaps those which might need to be flagged up and referred through to the different sort of panels, whether it's safeguarding or domestic abuse. I think it would be really worth exploring that idea further.
Yeah, it's a good point.
I would, if I may, I would also perhaps add that Reshma, if we can perhaps, if I can ask for you to deliver some training session to my practitioners who might, on the face of just one referral may not necessarily pick up that this might be a hate crime, or you may have some more intelligence that we do at the time of screening the referral, and kind of we might miss on something that will be a vital piece of information that could perhaps, change the direction of the referral, or how we would proceed with the referral. So maybe we can outside of this meeting have a discussion around doing some training for the MASH team, and likewise we will do some training for your teams as well.
Yeah, absolutely, that would be great. Thanks, Monica.
I just wondered, picking up on Reshma's points about how we might empower people, give people more skills and confidence that helps them to protect themselves, and obviously promotes well-being. Are there any examples of where some of that work has gone on amongst people here today? Or any ideas about how we could develop that better?
So I can just I think about of one example fairly recently, because it happened at the beginning of the lockdown. We had a case of cocoon, and it was very, very sad case where the adult was physically and financially being exploited, and what we through the work jointly with Safe Neighbourhood team, with the police, with colleagues from health, and obviously MASH team, we actually engaged with and managed to establish links with family members who were very, very far away and miles away from the adult, but were actually, wanted to be very much involved and wanted to support, but they didn't know what to do and how to support the adult. So we kind of reconnected the person with their family, and we also through support from CGL colleagues managed to the adult was very, very clear he did not want to live in Barnet anymore. He did say, I'm absolutely, scared of, staying in this accommodation. So we very, very quickly had a discussion with him around where he would like to go in terms of place of safety, thinking he would say somewhere in Barnet because he had some family members in Barnet. But he actually chose the family that was very, very far away, and he said, no, I want to go and see my family there because I have not been there for a long time, and I really, really would like to go to and stay with my my family there. And then so we obviously supported him in making this happen, and then we also contacted another local authority because we knew that this was just a temporary destination for the gentleman, and his actual wish was for longer term to reside with his mum in, I think it was Brighton, somewhere seaside, and we actually know. So what we did, we engaged two different local authorities. And we, together with housing, we supported this gentleman to go through the process of relocating. So but for a number of years, he was going through, obviously very difficult, very situation. And though there were some services, reaching out to him, he was very much like, no, I don't want any support. But finally, when he said that, no, I just cannot take it anymore, we then kind of thought, you know what, it's good that the community sector like CGL and voluntary care sector remained, stayed involved in his case, where he had somebody he could go to literally on a weekly basis to talk to them. And then when he got to the point where he said no more is no more, we were then able to mobilize our support and support him through the journey of and the changes. So I think it's very much around making sure that when we do know, when we do have information, that we share that information, that, we are very, very transparent with the adult, and that we are, we're using the availabilities of the risk panel that is being held every fortnight in Barnet, that we use community MARAC team, that we use other resources and other panels for that information sharing, for that information gathering, because that's what makes then our support stronger.
Yeah, it's a good example, and I think we'll be definitely picking up Peter's suggestion of looking too at how we make sure that there is consideration of the hate crime incidents that are coming up, at making sure it's at the right panel. There's a note from Afi, who couldn't speak but has left a question, and it was really I think just asking for a bit more detail around, for you, Monica, about the considerations around the threshold when you receive a safeguarding concern.
Yes, so the threshold is in terms of Section 42 is very clear. I think sometimes what we and also what we in applying the threshold in through the screening, we also have a very open discussions with the adult at risk in terms of what is that they would like to see happening, and most importantly as to whether they understand the risks and what is their view and how they would like to protect themselves. And sometimes people who have got care and support needs are able to very clearly to say, well, this is what I wish, this is how I wish to be supported, or this is what I want to be happening. And unfortunately, we have got legislation like Mental Capacity Act that we have to follow, and on certain occasions we just cannot go against the adult's wish. However, in some circumstances, and I'm sure Fiona will come on this, is we can perhaps override adults' wishes if we have got if there is a imminent risk to life, and obviously if there's a breach of human rights. But that's normally we would have to make sure that we follow the legal aspect. And in the first place, we always see as to we always check what is the adult's understanding and of the concern, the risk, what is the they think that they can do in terms of minimize it, remove it if where possible, and obviously what is the role of statutory or non-statutory services, because not everyone would want to have statutory services involved. And for example, we've had Solace who's been leading on developing that risk assessment. They're very robust in that risk assessment and that personal protection plan. And we often see adults who choose to go and to have a domestic violence officer doing that risk assessment and risk management planning with them, rather than and obviously they're happy for us to see it and then discuss anything. But so we always kind of try to see who would be the better service or person to lead or to take the further and responsibility on the case. So I hope it answers.
Thanks, Monica. Graham.
Although it wasn't a follow-on point to what Monica just said. I just noticed Fiona's hand has gone up, so I don't know if we want to try Fiona first.
Sure. So Fiona.
I was just going to apologise for the fact that being the lawyer on the call meant everybody was really nervous whenever they had to talk about human rights. And Monica's spot on. I mean, the whole thing about making safeguarding personal is that you safeguard people to help them achieve the outcomes they want. We're here talking about hate and hate crime, looking at making sure that we protect people's and give them the opportunity of equality to live free from abuse. We can't impose statutory services on them in an awful lot of situations, and particularly not against their wishes. If they lack capacity, their wishes are still valid. And it is about protecting people's rights to live freely and free of abuse. So Graham, you've got a very valid point. I won't talk for much longer, but I just wanted to kind of reassure Monica that I wasn't going to jump in and tell her she got it wrong. That the making safeguarding personal principles are the most critical thing, that we really do work with people to try and protect them, not just to meet the statutory kind of threshold criteria, if you like.
Sure. Thank you. And Graham?
Well, actually, I was just going to plug Reshma's training that she does, because she did it for a lot of Your Choice Barnet staff and service users and their parents. In fact, it was very good. And also, I remember sitting in on some training that the police had done, and it was absolutely brilliant. I'll tell you what made it. It was the role playing, the very visual nature of it. I just think of any training that interests you or I. You know, remember the best training you ever had? It probably wasn't someone sat showing you a PowerPoint presentation. It was someone actually doing something, acting something out. It makes it so much easier for people, especially with learning disabilities, to understand the principles. So that's what I'd recommend. And of course, if there is anything in writing, make sure that it's in an easy read format. So I think that's a way of getting our vulnerable service users to understand.
Yeah, thank you, Graham. And I was going to say at the end, but I'm sure, Reshma, that anybody who's been involved today and would be interested for their teams or to have the training, you could respond to that, wouldn't you?
Yes, absolutely. We'd be happy to do that. And as Graham said, I think role play is really a vital part of the training sessions that we do. And we have, you know, a good sort of 2 or 3 case studies that we'll look at with people and protecting themselves. And we've done those every year with the Adult Safeguarding User Forum, and it's worked really well with the members there and their family members who have also attended. The role plays really help them to understand the situation that they are being forced into. And so yes, thank you, Graham. And actually, I just wanted to also mention, Ray, you talked about the other kind of agencies and also the reporting centres. So if I can just mention now about those, that would be great. Please. Go back to the, oh no. If I can go back to the slides, I'll just show everyone those if possible. No, it's not going to let me do that now. Here we go. So yeah, if I just, this is where we left off. The reporting centres that we, oh, can you see this? Sorry, sharing is paused. Can Ray, can you see this slide?
No, we can't at the moment.
Let me see what's happened. Let's go back to there. That's always going to happen, isn't it, when you try and reshare your screen? Well, I'll just have to talk you through it. It doesn't let me. Okay. Right, so these are our reporting centres at the moment, and so the training that we've done so far is for the staff at all of these reporting centres, and where possible for their service users as well. We've got Barnet Homes, Your Choice Barnet, Community Barnet, Community Security Trust, Gallup, already a specialist organisation, HFT, Inclusion Barnet, Your Choice Barnet, and then Barnet Hill Academy and Barnet Multi-Faith Forum and Middlesex University. So we've really got a sort of wide range of reporting centres that support people in different areas across the borough, and we're always looking to increase that and train up staff in other organisations. So yes, we're absolutely happy to do more staff training. We also have a system of referral, so where our victims are, perhaps there is the safeguarding route, but if there isn't that trigger as yet, we do refer to other agencies within our network. And I think that's really important for people to know that if you did have a client with, for example, learning disabilities or autism, perhaps Barnet Mencap could support them further. If there was similarly a disabled person who was a victim of hate crime, we could, a Jewish disabled person who was a victim of anti-Semitic hate crime, they could be referred to Community Security Trust for support on the anti-Semitic incident side of things. Again, if there was somebody with mental health condition, we would refer to mine. So hate crime is something that we can use our network within Barnet to refer to each other. And I just wanted to mention that now. Stop sharing screen there.
That's great. Okay, we come into the last 5 minutes of today's session. Are there any last questions before we finish?
No.
I think I mean, I'd like to say that Hate Crime Week's always a busy week. We're usually, of course, out and about across the borough, trying to meet people, and there are some activities at the bus stations in Golders Green and Edgware this week, where the police will be out there talking to the public about hate crime. We've had today's event, and we've also got an event tomorrow evening, and I just thought, Reshma, it'd be worth having just a quick plug for that one in case anyone's interested.
Yeah, sure. We've got another webinar tomorrow evening, and that's going to focus on hate harassment, online hate harassment and extremism. So we're going to take up on the faith side and the perhaps extremism that we see online these days. And we've got speakers from Small Steps, who do work in far-right extremism. We've got a speaker from Facebook who's going to talk to us about some of the online reporting tools. So when we do see hate crime, harassment, or any online extremism, what people can do to report that, and what Facebook can do, for example, to help to take that down. So if anyone would like to join, we'd be most welcome to join us, and please send me an email so I can register you for that event. And I think Peter's got his hand up, actually.
Peter.
You might be on mute.
Thank you, Reshma. I should not be making that mistake anymore. It's worrying. I keep making it repeatedly. Yeah, in relation to the event that Ray and Reshma just mentioned, that's going to be in the evening, I think that's really well worth attending. I've been attended an event where some of those speakers were speaking previously, and some really insightful and gripping stuff. So I would encourage you, if you're interested, to, as Reshma says, make contact with her so she can register you, and indeed sort of share with your networks as well, if there might be other people that may be interested in attending. Also, just to say, it's really positive to see the number of hate crime reporting centres on the borough has increased, and thank you, Reshma. I know a lot of your hard work is behind that increase, and we've got at least I saw 2 or 3 more organisations. I think the Barnet Hill Academy, and there was one other that escapes me now, but really positive to see the number of hate crime reporting centres on the borough growing, and especially organisations that work with different communities on the borough, and hopefully that is something that we can continue and build on, and perhaps it may be worth sending something out to the people on this who attended this call, both in regards to just a reminder around if people are interested in the training that they can contact you, and also if people want to get more information about how an organisation can become a hate crime reporting centre in Barnet as well. And that's it.
That's great. Thanks, Peter. Okay, it just really leaves me to thank everybody for taking part today. I think it has been really useful, and it's certainly given us a couple of good suggestions about how to take forward the work in this area, and that focus on the overlap between safeguarding and hate crime. I'd like to also thank the panel and the people answering questions, and to Monica and Reshma in particular for really good presentations. Okay, we'll finish there. Thanks, folks. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
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 Reshma, well done.